All right, 6 o'clock by my phone. Good evening, everyone. This is the Town of West Newbury Finance Committee. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Public comment is the first item on our agenda. Is there any public comments? Being none, we'll move on to our next item, which is to review the sunset clauses for the proposed DPW articles. You want to go over those, I guess, quickly?
I don't have the ones that you were looking for.
Sure. One thing would be the facilities improvement article. We had portioned it into a few different pieces. I'm not sure what the plan is.
Yeah. So the select board talked that over last night. It's going to be broken into 3 separate articles.
Okay.
Each of the 2 that independently meet the capital threshold will be a standalone article.
Okay.
And then the remaining will be batched into a single article.
Okay. And is there a specific request on those, Wayne, related to sunset for the 3 different articles?
I just made them all June 30, 2025. So I did 3 years.
So that's end of fiscal year 24. I'd make a motion to add to the 3 articles related to the original facilities improvement article as a batch as the end of fiscal year 2024.
Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the sunset clauses as recommended unanimously passes.
The next one was the Page School exterior evaluation article for the cement crumbling. We were wondering if you had a recommendation or idea of when you need a sunset clause on that.
So that one I put at June 30, 2024, which is the end of 23.
Okay.
But obviously I want to get that done as fast as I can, but obviously I can find a consultant to do that. Our goal would be to try to trigger that this fall. And it's something that I assume they could do a couple of months. So I just don't want, I want to be cautious not to do a 23, just in case we don't get the report back. But I would hope that everything will be wrapped up by fall, winter, at least know where we're going from that point on.
Okay, I make a motion to add a sunset clause to the Page School exterior evaluation article to the end of fiscal year 23.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion?
Yeah, wait, he said 23, but he said June 2024. So
Yeah, but I mean, that's what I wrote on the original article.
right. So which
I would say that we should have it done by 23.
so that's 1 year from this June.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
6/30/23.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimously passes.
I believe the next one is the structural safety and assessment study at the Page School. I know that one's a as soon as possible one too, right? Wait.
It is, but there's gonna be a lot of players.
Okay.
And we know that. And we're gonna have to get a lot of people in line for that one. And does it become a committee? Does it come a board? Does it become whatever? So I did put it for June 30th, 2024, which is 2 years away. I think it's semi-reasonable for what we're trying to do. I mean, it's not just 3 of us in a room trying to figure out what the school needs. The school's gonna be heavily involved, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have public meetings. So it's definitely gonna be a well drawn out process, and that's assuming we got all the time in the world to put into it, which we're gonna do our best to really dedicate some time to that as town staff.
Okay. So I make a motion to add a sunset clause of June 30th, 2024 to the structural safety and assessment study of Page School.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the sunset as recommended? Unanimously passes.
Angus, I don't recall if we had done the town office phone system one.
A sunset date for it? I don't believe that we did.
No, but before we go on to that one, maybe can I want to get a clarification for the minutes. Wayne, was for the first one we talked about, that's going to be divided into 3 separate articles. Was that fiscal year 24? Like, in other words, June 30th, 2024, correct?
Yes, that'd be
Okay.
Fiscal at the end.
I was gonna question that too.
Yeah.
So June 30th, 25, yeah.
Right, but it's June 30th, 2024, correct? Okay, just want to make sure.
Thank you.
All right, cool, thank you.
Okay, so, I guess the next one is the town office phone system.
I put that down for June 30th, 2024. We've never done this before, and none of us are phone specialists. We're gonna look to do an RFP or an RFQ at first, but not understanding what material is out there in stock and equipment. I want to be careful that we don't force us into doing so too quick. So I wanted to give us some time on that one. It's a priority, but we need to prioritize this one, but we really need to get that school evaluation done also, so to try to balance a bunch of big projects at the same time. This will be very time consuming for DPW.
Make a motion to add a sunset clause of June 30th, 2024 to the town office phone system article.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the sunset clause as recommended, unanimously passes.
I think next up is the electric truck.
So we want to order the electric truck yesterday.
Right.
But we don't, the question is, when will we get an electric? I see what I put down. So the last gas powered pickup truck we ordered for the facilities took 14 months to get it. And that was gas powered with utility body on the backs and early COVID-19 time, like we call it, right before COVID-19 kicked in. I have down June 30th, 2024, which gives us 2 years to get the vehicle. I would say we get the vehicle for 2 years. If we don't, we should not get it.
It would seem extreme if you didn't get it by then.
Yeah. I would just put it for a year, but with the history of the 14-month truck, I was
Right, and there's been chip shortages. And things like
Yes.
that, so make a motion.
Issues.
Yes. So make a motion to add a sunset clause of June 30th, 2024 to the electric truck article.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the sunset clause as recommended, unanimously passes.
Next up is the F-550 truck.
Same exact
Same
thing.
one, okay.
Yep.
Make a motion to add a sunset clause of June 30th, 2024 to the F-550 pickup truck article.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimously passes.
The Emerald Ash Borer study.
So that I put in for.
I think we voted on that last
Did we?
meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we voted on that last meeting. It was,
So that was 23.
Yeah.
That was June 22. I mean, if we don't do it now.
whatever you
We
wrote in
might as well
there.
not do it.
Say don't bother.
Right.
Don't bother doing it if we don't do it this summer.
Right.
At this point.
I don't recall, but can someone remind me, did we vote on the public safety communication equipment funding page school article?
We did not. Telecom one, right?
That one I get down for 2024, but I mean, it's really not a lot of labor for Mike and I to pull it off. It's just material and a contractor. So I mean, it's something that we could pull off this fall. I don't want to say that without getting the vendor. It's a sole source. It's one guy to do the work for us, Motorola.
Sure.
We get behind.
Yeah, I would want to get away with it. So I'm going to make a motion to add a sunset clause on the public safety emergency communication on the page school article to June 30th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimously passes.
I think the rest that we had were fire and done.
Yeah.
Unless the AED one we didn't do, but I think we did it.
So you did do the AED.
Pretty sure.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we did.
And that we put down for 24, but
24.
we're gonna try to order it this fall, obviously, so. it might not be a point.
The defibrillator. one.
That's it.
I think that's it too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, man.
Next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes. Has everyone read and reviewed the minutes from our previous meeting?
I'll make a comment about that. So you guys all saw the last one, March 22nd. I'm almost done with the March 15th. My apologies to the committee. I'm finishing touches on it, and I'll send you a draft tonight, but March 22nd, I got feedback from Chris and from Stephanie. Thank you. And those are incorporated in the latest draft that you guys got.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from 3/22/22.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Any changes? All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented? Unanimous passes.
Thank you.
I guess before we get into departments and articles, could you briefly go over the things we're not covering tonight, just because it's being recorded?
Yes,
People are
yes.
expecting to
Yep.
hear about those things.
Yep, there are a couple of items that the select board is continuing to refine as proposals. And obviously, we've got two members here tonight, so they can elaborate, but in a nutshell, that would include the soldiers and sailors articles, as well as the budgeting for unbudgeted wage and salary costs. And we'll hear from water, but the scope of the water study is we're working with the vendor to broaden the scope and get an updated number. So I think whatever the number is going to be, the select board and the water commission are on the same page. They met last week and there's total agreement on that. We just don't know what the number is going to be. So you may prefer to, hold off on acting on that one.
Okay, great. Thank you. First up is water. Wherever you want.
I do also, I'm sorry, Gary, one other thing. The $48,000 article on pipe stave parking, that was removed from the warrant last night.
Okay.
That's going to be postponed till probably a fall town meeting. Great. So do you want to speak to it, or okay? So the water budget is, there are a couple of dynamics in there. One of the major ones is, with Mike's pending retirement during fiscal year 23, which is absolutely, you really can't overstate the loss for the town and all that Mike has done for, almost 2.5 decades here. Big shoes to fill and all of that. So there are some of that's reflected in the budget in terms of obviously not knowing what's going to be the salary of a new superintendent. So needing to budget conservatively for that, as well as there's a goal to have an overlap of 10 weeks. So we're basically carrying 10 weeks of double pay for both Mike and a new superintendent. We think that level of overlap would really be ideal given the depth of institutional knowledge and the wide range of responsibilities of the superintendent, from the office and the regulatory reporting, budgeting, staff oversight, as well as all the field operations and the daily testing and reporting. One of the other kind of major dynamics in the proposed budget is there is a new category of the budget, which is to authorize the transfer of $100,000 from water revenues into water stabilization. That's new. That's not something you've seen in prior years' budgets. The rationale for that is that the water rates were increased in the fall of 2019 in anticipation of debt service. And since that time, there's been the revenues have exceeded actual expenses, typically by more than $100,000 per year. So the rationale of putting that right into the water operating budget is that as they get toward the end of fiscal 23, if those revenues in fact are realized, and I'll get back to that in a second, that would allow the water commission to simply send a note to the treasurer, say, please move 100,000 from their water fund into the water stabilization. Which basically, the goal is to make it more clear to the ratepayers that part of what they're paying into in rates is going into longer term, basically, helping to finance the department's capital needs. The reason, I put kind of a qualifier on that is you never know what the revenues are going to be with the utility, and last year's revenues with COVID, and Mike could speak to this more, but more people home, more flushing of toilets, more whatever, that led to, more water usage. So we don't, they don't know what it's going to be next year. And so that when we talked with the Board of Water Commissioners last week, there was a question of, well, what if the revenues aren't where we think they are? You don't need to transfer it. If the actual revenues don't support that transfer, you can always underspend the budget. You can't overspend it. But the benefit of putting that 100,000 right into the operating budget is it gets it into stabilization before. It doesn't need to be closed out as retained earnings, certified by Mass Department of Revenue the following November, transferred the following May or April or May at town meeting. So basically it gets into capital almost really a year sooner, which is a real benefit because, as you know, there's quite a need for capital improvements, particularly the water main replacements. The church in Prospect, the engineering is underway right now. So those are the major dynamics that I see in the budget. I don't know, Mike, if you or Bob or Dick wanted to supplement that.
Well, that part of it would definitely have to be, as we were talking, to be in the motion so that if there was less money in there, we could put less even towards capital improvements and put it in stabilization. So if there was only 40,000 in it, but I think I was saying it would need to be documented somehow that that's how that would work within our operating budget.
Is that the 7,500 or is that?
No, that's a totally separate article.
Yeah.
So,
And to talk about the 7,500 while you're on that, that's what we've already done the past year.
Okay.
And so each year we try to just take it out of retained earnings, free cash, and put it in stabilization. So that just goes strictly to capital improvements. Of course, the water department doesn't get a lot of money for capital improvements, so it's all that we can get. But this would probably help and be a lot faster, like Andy was saying, for that.
So what we talked about is putting language into the actual motion to say that the, transfer upon written direction of the Board of Water Commissioners. That way the treasurer doesn't move the money on July 1st, which she wouldn't anyway, but that assures everybody that transfer does not happen until the Water Commissioner specifically direct it. And what we talked about is that could be done toward the end of the fiscal year when they know what their revenues and expenses have been. And if the money's there, it's just a much more efficient way, as well as being clear with the ratepayer that part of their rates are going into capital.
I just want to make sure I'm on the right thing. This is that one that's right now Article 5, correct?
Yes.
In the packet that you sent out.
Let me see. Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. And in this version, it's not in this version of the draft language because this was put together earlier. It was just on this past Wednesday evening, the Board of Water Commissioners and the Select Board met. And that was when it was kind of agreed that made sense. So.
Motion to approve water department budget.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion?
I just have one quick question. I just noticed that insurance has tripled in 2 years. That's probably a question for you.
Yeah, the big there's really actually two drivers. The main driver for that is health insurance because we don't know what the new hire, so we budget as if it will be a family plan. If it ends up being an individual or someone who's on their spouses, then we underspend that. But yeah, but then the second thing is with the bringing online the new water tank and the new chemical treatment building, especially the water tank, is valued much higher than the old one. So that did drive up the property casualty insurance. That contributes. The main driver is the health insurance.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? We've got a motion, we've got a second. All those in support of the water budget is presented. Unanimously passes.
So then you have two articles that were sponsored by the Board of Water Commissioners. One is to transfer $7,500 into capital stabilization from basically monies that were raised through the system connection, system development charges. So that's $7,500.
Make a motion to approve the water enterprise fund to stabilization transfer. That's the one, right?
That's the one, yeah.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion?
Just for the minutes, that's shown as Article 6. The numbers will change, but it's shown as Article 6.
All those in favor of supporting Article 6? It's unanimous. Jim, I'm going to give that to you.
Okay.
The other one was the hydraulic model study.
Yeah, and this one we're carrying in the draft special town meeting warrant because time is of the essence. The goal is to really get that, going and sign a contract probably the Monday after town meeting. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, the main So the proposal that you have in your packet is all good. That would happen, but over and above that, there's a couple of kind of ingredients that, you know, would be a goal to build into that study to make it more comprehensive. And this is, you know, largely driven, not entirely, but largely driven with Mike's pending retirement to try to capture as much of his institutional memory as possible before he goes. So that a new superintendent and the you know, Board of Water Commissioners are in a, you know, have kind of a roadmap to go forward. So the key ingredients I'm referring to are to help prioritize the water main replacements. I think you guys have probably seen this in the past, and this has been built into the town's capital program. And this does have, you see, it's got the phase, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. We'd like to get that to a more granular level of detail, so we have a better projection on financial impact. Is this a, you know, 15-year program? Is this a 30-year program? Obviously, that's all, like, you don't know, but to have some kind of a long-range projection of when the different mains may be done and what that would translate to in terms of either direct costs or more likely debt service, you know, to borrow for this, and how that would, if you layer that on top of the water rates, you know, how would that be absorbed? So that's one ingredient, is kind of tying it directly to the capital program and a prioritized capital list. The second is to get advice from the vendor on financing options. There's, you know, there's some things out there, whether state, you're really primarily federal grants, as well as the state revolving loan fund, that we've asked the vendor to include in their proposal specific work to prepare what's called a project evaluation form, which is due in August. That's the necessary first step to be considered for the SRF funds. Basically, you submit that in August, and then your goal is to get built into the state what's called the intended use plan in the following January. And then if you're successful, that would get, and the idea is for the church and prospect mains, if those were financed through the SRF program, the town would then enter typically a 20-year repayment agreement. So it's kind of like, you know, it's not direct debt service, it's repaying the state through the SRF program. So having Tate and Howard's direct assistance to do that paperwork and keep that on track is going to be really, really important. So that's going to be part of their scope and budget. And then finally, we want to include the rate study. Normally, the water department does a rate study every 3 years. The last one was finished in November 2019. So the normal timing would be this fall. But with Mike leaving and with a big kind of comprehensive study, it seems to make sense to look at rates at the same time. That would be done by a sub-consultant or a separate vendor, not Tate and Howard. But the idea is it would be done in parallel, so those would all be in alignment. What we expect to see is that when you layer on these capital needs with what are already very, very high water rates, it will probably show that it is a crushing financial burden and probably unsustainable for the ratepayers to solely bear that cost. But it's one thing to kind of say that and to kind of know that in your gut. It's another to have like a, you know, fully vetted study that basically shows if it was fully financed by the ratepayer, this is what that would translate to in rates. So it's a pretty ambitious study, but I think with the transition in the department leadership, it's going to be really, really helpful.
Make a motion to approve special town meeting Article 2, the hydraulic model study.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
I have a question. So you were saying that the rate study would not be done by Tate and Howard. Is that going to be covered by the $27,000?
No, none of what I've described is other than that's what I was trying to be clear. These three ingredients are going to drive that number.
It's probably going to be another, at least 20,000.
Yeah, it could be double this number.
When does that, do you expect that to come before?
Well, we threw a lot onto the engineer, but I believe by the end of next week.
We thought we might have something by the end of this week from them, but then whether they hit the mark or whether there's some, you know, the goal when the select board meets a week from Monday on the 11th, you know, we hope to have a good number by then.
So is it an ongoing thing? I guess that's what I'm confused by.
Yeah, they said, yeah, it's an ongoing thing to scope it. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So that 27,000, to Nathan's question, that'll change.
It will. Yeah, there's the prior study. This is the 2009 study that they did, and it covers a lot, but it doesn't cover those other ingredients. So this study is basically a $27,000 study. And with the other things added into that, it's gonna drive the cost.
When we met with the select board had some very good suggestions to do, before I'm gone. And then to also spell out the cost of everything. Yeah.
Thank you.
Your view, gentlemen.
Yeah, just curiosity, because this is all new to me with the water department in particular. So you're saying $13 million to upgrade the water mains throughout town over a certain time frame.
In today's dollars.
That's what I was gonna, next question is, what's the time frame?
It says it's gonna go up.
Yeah.
Understandably.
Yeah.
Like the first two right there, we already have, we just got the plans today. It's halfway through the engineering, because we already allocated the funds for engineering.
What's the anticipation if you had, if this was a dream world, what time frame for all of it?
30 years.
How many?
30 years.
How did you pick the order?
Yeah, that's a good question. The order is from my brain, and knowing what are the worst water mains in town. Basically what it is most of the 6-inch dead end lines are tuberculated down to 3 inches, and we don't have any fire flow. So Church Street and Prospect Street are the worst in town. Basically, they're down there, and everything, the sediment and everything goes down to the lower point from the high point and settles there. 24 years ago, when I came here, the fire flow was only 500 gallons a minute. I'm sure it's less than that now. So that is based on what we know in the water department, what are the worst water mains. Now, a lot of this is done with the engineers under ISO, and it basically says, okay, you have to go out here to the water main out here and put a 16-inch water main out there, because that's what ISO is requiring, which most towns, as you may know, do not have fire flows for ISO. Now, they just don't have it unless they're new. So what happens is this water main out here, we've taken coupons out of there and sections out of there, and it's in perfectly good shape because there's flow to the tank every day on the main drag. So to look at it in an easy way, if we don't take care of those arteries down there, then just like our own body, we've got to bypass those arteries somehow. But we got to get those arteries out of there. So we have to get that water main out of there. A lot of the stuff that's happening right now, and it just happened in the last 2 days, the fire department went out there and had a dryer fire. They opened a hydrant and they filled their fire truck. And then I got home at 5 o'clock and I'm getting all kinds of calls like, what's wrong with the water? Well, of course, flushing's coming next week, as we do it every Patriots Day and every Columbus Day. We start that 2 weeks of flushing. So the system is ready to be flushed. So there's a lot of sediment, iron, manganese in there right now that needs to come out. Those water mains need to be replaced just to kind of maybe lower some of those complaints, to be honest with you, because as soon as you turn the valve, it's there. It's nothing I can do. And then you say, well, you got to go out and flush it. Well, you can't go out and flush it because now it's even going to be worse. So you have to just run your water and hope it settles out and give it a few hours. And that's what we have to do. So a lot of this in the first plan from Tate and Howard, that's done from ISO, and they had different roads and stuff. And then I had to talk with Tate and Howard to say, look, we know what we have out there. We know that Maple Street, and as I have it right there, Church, Prospect, Chase, that goes in order, what the priority is on the way we feel about that. And most of them are smaller mains that need to be replaced. Like it was supposed to be clean and line on that one, the first one, but we said there's no reason to clean and line a 6-inch line if it's still not going to give you ISO fire flows. So we might as well just bite the bullet and put a brand new 8-inch in there to get the flows.
Jim, did you have something?
Similar to Chris's point, Mike, in this 27,000 plus study from Tate and Howard, let's say, we had that on Bridge Street recently, we had those water main breaks.
Yeah.
And will this study kind of predict also what mains are going to burst next? It's completely unrelated to this.
They're all whatever 90-year-old water mains or whatever, 80 to 90-year-old water mains out there. You really don't know. It's cast iron out there. You really don't know. It depends on the soils, like Sullivan Court, that has bad soils. So we used to get a lot of breaks there. So we just, with this new addition down there, we added a new water main to go further and just got rid of a lot of pipe that was in there. But no, it won't, Jim.
Oh, yeah.
And then a lot of stuff like that, like on Bridge Street, is what they call AC pipe, asbestos cement pipe, transite pipe. That has a C factor of 100%, so there's no tuberculation in there, and the flow stays good. But of course, that's a danger, but not dangerous because Wendy's on that line.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, Wendy gets no water.
But Wendy knows all about that, and it actually is coming up. I mean, truthfully, you only have to test that line every 9 years at a household that's there, which is Wendy's house. So I might get to see her one more time before I head out of here.
Any other discussion? Go
But I'm
ahead.
still curious about the long-term plan for this, because Angus was saying it's an unsustainable model to be funded by the water supply itself, so
Right, yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be a kind of an all of the above strategy. One of those is gonna be with the SRF. That is definitely, it's borrowing, so it's not free money. You are paying an interest rate, but you're paying typically around a 2%. So it's gonna be very favorable. We need to really get into the point where we're pursuing that as frequently as we can manage the projects. I mean, Mike and I have talked, you could have funding for the first 5 projects next year. We don't have the bandwidth to manage that many projects in a single year. So I would hesitate to say something like we'd be pursuing SRF every year, because I just think that's like, we have a small department. We can't, it's a huge effort to do these, to do a $1.6 million project is a huge level of effort. But maybe it becomes every 2 years or every 2 to 3 years. So we have a good system in place between the finance department, the water department, and any consulting support to really aggressively go after that SRF money. Second is going to be any federal monies. That's again, a capacity issue. But I think between the finance department, water department, and with the, proposed new position with DPW, the projects and programs manager, part of that is to help us manage more grants than we already are. And then finally, and Mike, you can speak to this, or Bob or Dick, the water commission, board's been clear for at least a couple of years, probably more, that they feel that at some point the town ought to take on some financial responsibility
And
for
to that
water
point,
capital
capital
needs.
improvements, we were discussing that in the last couple of years, and many of us that were on the committee a couple of years ago acknowledged that this is a burden, not just for the ratepayers, but probably the whole town as well.
But that's going to be a decision for
Right.
town
I mean,
meeting.
obviously
There's
that's
nothing
their whole job.
specifically proposed for that. But part of the importance of this study, we understand that's a big, kind of not just philosophical, but financial threshold to cross. And so we know that, we got to get all this stuff, this knowledge from Mike's head into like a report that people can read. And if you read it and come to the conclusion that it's really not sustainable by the ratepayers, what then? That's where we need to get as a community. So there's a collective recognition of like, okay, we got a real problem here. Because I think we get it.
Does anybody have anything in addition to add?
Are there any health issues associated with this, with these old pipes deteriorating?
No,
Nothing getting into the water that's
no. I mean, it's iron and manganese is basically what you see when you get the brown water. Manganese is natural in there, and iron is too. But then cast iron that's unleaded, that's rusting out. That's what gets flushed out all the time. But it's not something that our water quality is excellent. We also, that's another thing though, and it really is. You can see the numbers. It's amazing right now. But when we turn the report on, we have to pull in the report water. That's when our complaints come. It's still safe, good water, but it's from a pond. So let's put it that way. And they have an antiquated treatment facility that needs to be upgraded too. And but no, there's nothing, dangerous out there. We're very low on it, but not brag on it, but this town's been lucky. The big thing that you've heard about is PFAS. Which is really the most serious thing right now. And we've gotten very low hits, even no hits on both of the wells down here. So we're really lucky there. So the only other thing, if it ever keeps going and gets worse, would be manganese, because once that gets over, like a 0.5 parts, then they'll start having you test more often, and then you might have to put about $1 million treatment facility down at our well down here to take that out. But we're nowhere near that. No. So no, there isn't really, anything to worry about.
Any other
Except for
discussion?
chlorine, this is normal. I want to tell you that, chlorine is carcinogen, so, put it in a pitcher, let it breathe out. Don't drink it right out of the faucet. That's the best thing to do. I mean, but the limits are, we're only at 1 part, 4 parts, and over is what's illegal. We don't even get to those.
All right, then a motion,
talk to you all
we've
day.
had a
I know.
second, we've had
Interesting.
discussion, all those in favor of this article unanimously passes. That's it.
That's it, I think, for water. Yep.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said it here. Suppose you're.
That's the best.
Yeah, best of luck.
We can see you.
And thank you for all your help.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure getting to know you over the years.
Thank you very much. Still 6 months away, so we'll see each other.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. All right.
Parks and Rec is next.
Okay, we've got Brad Bashir, as the chair of the commission. You have in your packet both the budget that I've proposed as well as the initial budget that the commission proposed. They're, really relatively within a few bucks of each other in terms of the bottom line. 27,720 was proposed. I put forward 24,785. Part of that, we moved some things into some different buckets, as well as in the initial proposal from the commission, it carried funding for the pipe stay vegetation management. And where that's a one-time expense, not an annual expense, I recommended that be broken out as a separate article, which is also before, on the draft warrant. So there's been a lot of dynamics in Park and Rec, and, you can ask and go into whatever detail, but part of that's with the change in composition of the commission and really a renewed look at the fee structure, how that's set, how that's administered, and as well as bulking up the town staff capacity to actually support the commission, which had been largely independent of town staff for a couple of decades.
Make motion to approve the recreation budget.
Is there a second? I have many questions on this. My understanding is you're going to begin charging fees for field usage in town.
We have been charging fees.
What's the revenue projection on that?
This year we're carrying 14.8.
And what's your expended expenses for maintaining these fields that we're charging residents fees to use?
The expenses are largely driven by baseball diamond startup, as well as porta potties.
Okay. And how much money in terms of field maintenance?
Maintenance, when that's under a separate budget, that's under DPW.
So you generate money from fees to rent out fields, but you don't actually use any of those funds to maintain the fields.
DPW carries budget to mow, like they do at all the town facilities and the roadsides. They also have line item where they charge, where they're responsible for the irrigation startup. And typically there's always something that needs to be repaired or addressed. At least in my experience, not here in Western New York, I don't know that for a fact. Then there's also Osborne Organics. The town contracts with Osborne Organics to develop a turf management plan, which my understanding is the town self-performs.
Okay. Well, I know a little bit about baseball fields. Over time, I spent some time managing fields in town. I serve another hat I wear is I'm the treasurer of Kentucky Babe Ruth. And over the past several years, all the leagues that I've been associated with have put thousands of dollars in field maintenance. And those baseball fields, mowing it is not really maintenance. I mean, those lines have to be cut. They put clay down. It takes a lot of hours of work and a lot of dollars, of effort to make them something that you actually could rent out. So these organizations are so small that they're not going to be able to continue to perform that if they have to pay the fee to use the fields. So my concern is not so much fee structure, which is your right to do, but it's that to maintain an asset that's going to be something people are going to want to use, you're going to have to put more money into it. Have you folks talked about how you're gonna remedy that, or?
Gary, I've been chair for less than a year.
Yeah.
I've been on the commission for less than a year as well. These are all very good questions, and I would encourage you to run for Parks and Rec if you want to contribute to this discussion.
Well,
We would love to have you.
I appreciate that very much, but that's not really an answer to my question. Is it something that's come up?
My understanding is, we are in the process of developing a fee structure for field use. In doing so, we compared what we're currently charging, which is $5 an hour, to the surrounding communities. And what we discovered is the town of West Newbury is an exception to what is occurring in other communities. So at Merrimack, they don't charge a thing. The town absorbs all of these expenses. Same for Groveland. However, there's a bit of a fee if you want to use the lights. I think it's like $25 if you use the lights at the Pines. Salisbury and Amesbury both have different field use fee structures. It's a hybrid for both. They charge per player for certain types of user groups, and then they charge per hour for other types of user groups. Ultimately, the fee structure we put in place was established under the previous chair based on the model that was established in Newburyport, which is $5 per hour. The rationale for establishing a field use fee structure predates my tenure on the commission.
My concern is this. So in my capacity as the treasurer of Kentucky Bay Ruth, I spent $6,500 to maintain 2 fields. One of them is in this town, Pike State Hill, and the other one is in Groveland at the Ponds. So you're correct in saying I didn't pay a fee, but in effect, we did pay a fee because we maintained a field that the town could, conceivably charge other people to use.
And the town has been telling the Parks and Recreation Commission that those types of activities are not prohibited, that we should get those in line, and that the league should not be outsourcing services on town fields.
Right.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm just stuck in the middle between the town.
Was the town aware that the league was doing these repairs?
Brad, that's actually not what took place. You're the one who raised the concern about third-party groups expending money and whether that was a workaround of procurement. You personally brought that up.
That's not my recollection.
That's a fact.
I guess.
It's a fact.
Okay.
I'm not upset with you. I'm just curious how it's going to work because I'm curious how it's going to work because, when the high school team plays at the Pines and plays at Pike State, but it contributes no money toward maintenance.
I just got an email from Dan Thornton who just asked if the clay is dry enough for his crew to come out there and do some work.
Yeah. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just concerned about not having the resources to to keep these fields in a condition that they'll be usable for the children in town, or have them so you're in a position to rent them out and raise them.
I have a comment maybe kind of to address what you're asking, Gary, and I kind of feel for Brad. Over 10 years ago now, it's been maybe even 15 years ago, I was the chair of Parks and Rec, and so I worked on the fields myself, and I was involved with the youth leagues very much at that time. And the way we divided our responsibility at that time was the youth leagues did all the base path work, lining, obviously, all the and what Parks and Rec did was seeding, irrigating, and you mentioned that organic company, fertilizing the fields. And that was kind of our division of responsibility. And it seems like you're doing maybe something similar now, but that's the way we had done it back in the day. So I'm just kind of like, But Gary's not even hearing my answer, so.
I'm sorry, forgive me.
So I was just describing that back, again, this is more than 10 years ago, so it's maybe irrelevant. But the way we divided our responsibility with the youth leagues was Parks and Rec was actually responsible for seeding, irrigation, the grass more or less.
Right.
Making the soccer fields, the baseball fields kind of look nice and fertilizing, seeding, et cetera, irrigating. And that the youth leagues were actually doing the base paths and putting the clay down and the lining and we kind of divided it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't want to put you on the spot, Brad. I've never met you before. If I've upset you, I apologize. I'm just, in dealing with this in the level that I have, I just worry that, we're missing a portion of this that we need to address.
And one of the challenges of setting a fee structure is because there have been different user groups that have over the years done this, that, or the other at different levels. I think the commission has, has been trying to get at what's the right fee structure that accounts for the fact that some groups are providing in-kind services. And that's something that the draft fee structure that Brad put together a few weeks ago or a month or so does try to take that into account. The one that was approved in the summer of 2021 doesn't. So, yeah, I mean, I've talked about, I've had concerns about if this, especially on the baseball diamond, if that third party that's been doing it all this years doesn't do it,
Someone's gonna pick it up.
right. So
That's my point. And do they charge any fee for like the equestrian things that happen in Pike State?
no,
We
historically, no.
We tried and the town has told Parks and Rec that we have no purview to charge West Newbury Riding and Driving Club.
It seems like we've got two standards of service. I mean, you should be able to charge both, I think.
The draft policy we have
does.
Sorry.
It's not that simple.
Sorry, go ahead.
It does allow for a fee reduction of up to 50% for volunteer services.
Okay.
And again, it's 2-page policy based on Newbury reports. And the push to establish a fee structure predates my involvement, and perhaps you could, with your wealth of knowledge, share with the committee.
I'm not going there. I am in favor of the commission looking at the balance between the taxpayer funded and the fee supported portion of expenses. Back in the summer of 2020, the former chair of the commission incurred 5 figures of expenses that were not budgeted, that were in fact over budget. We had to go back to the fall town meeting in the fall of 2020 to get a budget amendment to pay expenses that had already been incurred by the former chair of the Park and Rec Commission. You may recall that. Correct. I made it very clear that while I did the legwork to bring that forward and bring that to town meeting and get that approved, I said, this should not be seen as a permanent structural increase in the operating budget of the Park and Rec. So I have been urging the commission to look at their fee structure to make sure that there's an appropriate balance.
It's not fair to them if they can't charge, the equestrian component. I mean,
Under the law, Gary, this is not a philosophical, this is under what Brad was purporting to do to charge the equestrian for use of the parking lot at Pipe State. There is zero authority to do that. This was not advice on a philosophical, this was advice on under what authority are you purporting to do that? There was no authority.
For parking, and the only licensing board in town that put up parking signs is the board of selectmen. So they limit parking there on like Saturdays and stuff when there's a million kids playing. There's like 8 soccer fields there. And there's a huge portion of that parking lot that's devoted to equestrian, which was done to try to maintain peace, and Parks and Rec did that. And most of the time it doesn't really matter, but on really busy days, residents say to me, they say, hey, how many kids in town play sports versus how many people own horses? And it's a pretty easy answer.
The other angle to that is how many individuals participating in youth sports are from the Pawtucket communities compared to equestrians, and the large share of equestrians are from out of town. That said, it's a wonderful, wonderful facility, and it's super well loved by everyone in town, and I think that we're really, really quite blessed with having such a great resource. That Jim, I believe you were pretty involved in its actual creation way back in the day. So you know, we're very fortunate and for such a small town to have such a great space for our kids to play. And we're working with I think his name's Jeff Meisner on getting Babe Ruth all lined up and getting Little League all lined up, a bachelor. You know, essentially Parks and Rec has two main budget items. It's the porta potties and it's the baseball diamond startup. To address what Angus said, my recollection is that my only concern was a prevailing wage concern for outside vendors using doing maintenance on town-owned facilities. That turns out not to be a concern.
You raised a concern about procurement. I didn't raise that concern.
Procurement of what? Field materials or?
Of a third-party group engaging a vendor to do work on public land, and whether that was a workaround of procurement. That was your concern.
My sole concern was prevailing wage.
That's not true.
Why did I lie?
I was there.
Obviously, there's a lot of issues. I think we're overlapping a lot of issues, obviously. The fee schedule, I was on the Pawtucket School Committee, we went through the same thing. And the thing I found out at the time, and I'm wondering if this is occurring here, is we had a lot of outside organizations using the facilities and paying almost nothing and running businesses through the school district. So we put a fee schedule in place that would sort of equate that. So are we having other towns, other people using our facilities is my first question.
Well, I mean, there's regional usage, which Brad mentioned.
So that's a really good question.
But I sort of mean outside independent, like do you have a camp that's coming in and charging kids to practice baseball, not necessarily one day with teams from another town coming, that's totally different.
Yeah,
Over 40 soccer, you know, that kind of stuff.
yeah, pre-pandemic. So this all predates my involvement with the commission. But pre-pandemic, we used to have, I believe, a men's softball league that came and used the page. Right now, there's only Pawtucket teams using the fields, and the general philosophy the commission has is we're a regional town, and we support Merrimack and Groveland because we're all operating in the same milieu. For example, Pawtucket youth soccer girls play at Shanahan, period. You know, that's where girls soccer happens for U12, U14. Same thing for Town Forest. So West Newbury girls leave Pipe State and then they go play soccer at those two facilities through PYSA. However, PYSA has 2 nights in the spring here at Pipe State. It's just the way that the system has evolved, and we all are integrated.
So again, I guess my feeling is if it's town residents playing out of town teams, that's fine. Why are they paying fees? I mean, why can't that be incorporated within a budget? That's number one. I'm gonna go through it quick because this is a lot of time on a silly issue.
Yeah, I agree.
At the end of the day, I think the biggest issue is Pipe State Hill and the utilization of that space. And I went to the planning board about 4 or 5 months ago and encouraged them overall for the town to pursue a new comprehensive plan so that we could address issues like that. Because you've got so many groups fighting for that space, be it the Dunn property, Pipe State Hill proper, the equestrian, the parking, the games, the conflicts. And there is no clear direction on it. We've got 2 other issues here tonight.
Quick, just to finish what else we were saying in terms of outside people seeking use of town assets. There is a private entity, baseball entity, youth baseball group that has, I would say probably 10 to 20% of their kids are Pawtucket kids, and they would like to lease the fields. And the fee structure is set is $15 per hour for out of town users. The other thing to consider too, in terms of our fields, and I don't have, my kids don't play baseball, 1 year, 1 season in T-ball. We do not use the diamonds at Page. The Page diamonds, used to be used by West Newbury softball, but, the numbers are small and we merged with Merrimack. So we do have assets that are underutilized and are not designed for, when I say rectangles, you know, we need more rectangles than diamonds. That's probably for a baseball person, that's.
No, more kids play soccer than play baseball, that's not.
Well, it's not just that, it's flag and lacrosse,
Lacrosse,
yeah, that have really taken off, but the fee policy that we have in place right now, that we just voted on, is just those 2 individual rates. There are other components that are considered, and in that structure, that policy will hopefully over the next 6 months be implemented in full. The one last thing that I would add, Chris, is we did early on when I joined the commission, we did reach out to Open Space Commission to try to do a joint proposal to amend the CR at High State to allow for more intensive recreational use through the development of an artificial turf field. Not necessarily in exchange, but at the same time to get a CR undone to protect it from future development. And there was a strong sense that from members of the Open Space Committee that there's going to be a school there undone, and that the artificial turf field should go down there and done rather than up at High State. So, you know.
I was on the committee to build a field at Pike State. I was on the committee to purchase done, so I'm familiar with it both very well. The committee never said, I was also on the master plan committee.
He's talking about open space meeting. So
Right, but all I'm saying is
weren't
everybody is coming in with different perspectives. And somebody's got to look at these parcels as a whole for the town, be it recreation, be it schools, be it, I know people want to do agricultural back on down, which is what it was. Or people want to put restrictions. Everybody's looking at this in their very micro-focused interest, and the town really has got to get a comprehensive plan to look at all the utilization, not sports and equestrians and buildings, but everything together as an entity. Because otherwise, we're going to keep hitting these log jams, and it's not going to work.
Anybody have anything new?
I do.
Go ahead.
I'm curious, the new reservation software, is it in this budget or somewhere else?
It's split between town manager and the park and rec. It's only $3,000 a year, believe it or not.
And then the other thing is, I see the money being put towards action code. I wonder just if the commission has started thinking about long-term capital plans with regard to action code, because since 2011, or with the ADA rules that came out in 2011, 1 year later, we've been in violation for 10+ years of American Disabilities Acts with that playground. Is major violation.
We should try to advance the CPC article to fund the planning.
I'm sure it wouldn't come through that, but
And
you know,
and this path that we.
I'm not saying you have anything on your plate like that. You have something like on plan already. I'm saying is it something that you guys are even aware of that the town's major park is in violation and has been for 10+ years? And is that something that you're thinking about at this point in time, or is it not something that you guys are aware of?
This past year, the past 3 months, I've spent probably 40 hours developing a community preservation article. I attended multiple meetings, and the committee strongly urged the commission to postpone something until fall.
That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Anybody have anything else? We've had a motion, we've had a second, we've had discussion. All those in favor of the budget is presented. Unanimously passes. Thank you.
Parks and Rec tree removal article, is that right?
Yes. Can you see if you can grab him?
Sorry, it's my fault. I thought we were- Right.
So this is what I'd mentioned earlier, was initially carried in the operating budget. I'd recommended it be broken out as an article. So this is the quote. It's obviously the proposed amount is somewhat less than this. So
Make a motion to approve the article.
Which is at 9,900, right?
correct, yeah.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the articles presented? You?
No.
4, 1 against?
No, against it.
2, you're against?
3 to 2? Okay.
3-2. I think, is there any other article? First one?
There was the CPC proposal, as Brad mentioned, but on Thursday night, the CPC had suggested they withdraw that.
Can they give you a quick and dirty reason why they wanted to wait?
There was concern about, I think, expense associated with consultant services. There was concern about the scope of work, because it included not only existing assets, but also additional uplift. And I think the third primary item was the town's bandwidth to advance another capital project. Anybody else wants to chime in?
Was it was give an idea, this was just a study or was the actual?
This would have done survey and resource area delineation, because the majority of the southern border of the site abuts a wetland. And the other factor that we were trying to include was the wetland crossing right by Action Cove to the trails that are at Drake's Landing. If you guys are familiar with it, it's a big pond that's, ankle deep, and you can't access the trails. So we were including that delineation. And then to think about more broadly about the town's demographics, we were trying to think about what other uses could be appropriate for the upland space that is owned by Parks and Rec. And there was concern about expansion of facilities, I suppose.
Thank you. I guess we're all set.
Thank you.
So was it, Nathan, you made the motion, Chris seconded, right?
I mean,
You made the motion. Who seconded that motion?
did you second the motion? Who seconded?
Chris.
Chris.
Chris, okay.
Making it happen. Just take off. Yeah. No pause?
Make a motion to approve the mill pond budget.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the mill pond budget is presented, unanimously passed. Bandstand.
Make a motion to approve the bandstand budget.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the bandstand budget? Select board.
The major change in the select board budget on the downward side. Last year, around this time, we were getting meeting minutes done in 2 different ways. We had a kind of part-time as needed staff person who did it on an hourly basis, as well as a vendor. Since that time, we've switched, and at this point, all the minutes are being done by a vendor. So that's hence the reduction of that $4,000 was what had been carried in the current year to support staff preparation of minutes. So it's basically level funding the existing staff position with just the assumed 2% COLA.
I make a motion to approve the select board budget as presented. Second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the budget as presented? Unanimously passes. Town manager.
The main dynamic of the town manager budget is the proposed, so last year at this time, we had proposed a new support position to support both my department and the finance department at a budgeted rate of about $49,000. At the time we were preparing that budget, we didn't know that that Mike McCarron was going to retire. So his departure created a lot of moving parts on legal, on clerk, and on purchasing, among others. So, basically the proposal carries that position at a higher rate of pay more in the low 70s for more of a executive assistant type position. One of the things that's changed in the 3.5 years I've been here is there is no direct support position to the town manager. There is no admin, there is no person on staff whose job it is to support the town manager. When I started, there was a position that I was told would be that admin. For a number of reasons, that didn't happen. So after 3.5 years and with the workload and the bandwidth, it's really unsustainable. So basically the proposal between the town manager and the finance department is to take the current position, which is really on paper split between the two, which is the assistant to the town manager of the finance department, to carry that position 100% in the finance department, and then to have this unfilled position now filled at a higher wage position as basically executive assistant to the town manager. So the finance department would have 3 full-time staff. The town manager department under this proposal would have 2 full-time staff. Still no admin, and that is a concern, but with the change in the clerk's office from town clerk counsel to now town clerk, and the full-time assistant town clerk, as well as kind of optimizing the staff we think this is a workable proposal.
So will the committee,
Make a motion to approve town manager budget.
is there a second? Any discussion? All those, go ahead, Jim.
It seems like, you described a lot of the personnel issues, but it seems like in your narrative here, and the attachment thing is, a lot of it was related to technology.
Mm-hmm.
And could you describe that a little bit more? Like, is it like ransomware? Is it a change of I don't know, like vendors? You kind of mentioned that.
So we are changing, or have recently changed our server backup. So that's part of that, is to get a better backup. We also, let's see, the server rack security project, that's a one-time expense. That's something that was flagged in the audit management letter. Is right now the server is in the assessing office and it's unsecured. And so while the idea someone's going to come in and start tearing wires, it probably won't happen, but it could happen, and it really ought to be in a locked cabinet. So that carries about $6,700 for that.
Okay.
I will say that there hasn't been a clear, as you know, for the 5 years before I started, there were, I think, 5 town accountants and 3 or 4 finance directors. So there was no consistency on how things were budgeted. One thing that we found definitely very much so is that there hadn't been a consistent or clear method of budgeting for equipment replacement. So when you need to get a new laptop, a new desktop, over the years, if you look at how those have actually been paid, sometimes they're paid in that department's budget, sometimes they're paid out of the finance budget or the town manager budget. Where my department carries a technology line item, I'm moving more towards centralizing budgeting for that, like we did in my last town, where we actually had a capital plan with every piece of equipment. We're not there yet here, but we kind of had, I will say, I think we made very good use of the CARES money. We bought a lot of laptops and mobile, devices at no cost to the taxpayer using that federal money with COVID. But now that CARES money is no longer eligible going forward. And Stephanie's been very helpful with this, as well as Jake Susi, who's our IT vendor. We're really working toward having a much more predictable plan of equipment upgrades and replacement for the whole town offices, rather than each department kind of budgeting that for themselves. And then finally, there's just a pretty modest $1,000 increase to expand the permit link software that the building department uses to include planning permits as well. That was actually something planning put in as a article request, but I told Leah, that's such a small one. I'll just put it in my budget. That's a silly article.
Does anybody have any other questions? All those in favor of the budget as presented? Unanimously passes. Finance department?
So much of what I just said kind of dovetails with that. I did include this kind of comparative staffing. This isn't scientific. There's some, asterisks in some of these. One of these towns handles school payroll, not just town. So there's always some nuance when you're looking at intertown, but it does kind of illustrate what I've said, which is that our finance department right now with 2 full-time people, basically a half of another person and 0 admin, is just a really crushing workload for the people we have. So
It's a little
Make
bit-
motion to approve the town finance, the finance department budget.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of the budget as presented, unanimously passes. Finance Committee.
Us. Goodness.
So I always put this one last because with the reserve fund, you've been kind of 60 grand, you did bump it up last year to offset things that you had reduced.
When we expected to actually spend that money, so we built in the overhead cut all the time, we put them in case we need it.
Right. Yeah. So I think the only thing, as I look back on this budget cycle, the only thing I kind of have a little bit of cold feet on is the steep reduction in budgeting for recycling. Because, as we know, that's a dynamic market. They had initially come in at, I think, whatever number, 50, and then it went down to 25. And then I believe it was cut to 10.
Yeah.
I do have some cold feet about 10 for recycling for a whole year. If that market changes, so it's out of health, but maybe you think about bumping up the reserve fund to account for if the recycling market turns and that becomes a cost again. But it's obviously totally your prerogative
So your proposal is 60.
Well, I didn't want to, I mean, I didn't propose, I just put in basically like what had up until last year always been the same.
It always just been.
Yeah. So that's kind of the starting point. But the reason I put it kind of toward the end of the budget discussion is so you could kind of look back over the whole cycle. And is there contingency that you feel ought to be built in?
We cut.
Just the recycling, I think.
I believe it was waste collection.
Yeah, the
How much was the cut?
It was about 40, I think I have to look.
but I think it was specifically
It's the level funded.
recycling. I think so.
They added library.
Right, they added to library, but that's different. Yeah.
Can I ask a question before the motion?
Yeah, go ahead.
So that 60,000 is a reserve that this committee then uses to cover.
The only money that we have control over is the reserve, and sometimes things occur, like there was steel and they had they had put in a pipe to deal with it. There was a methane cloud that was kind of floating around, and it was past the budget, so we did that. So anything-
Wasn't there equipment at Page one time, too, kitchen equipment? or
It was
something?
kitchen equipment, one of the kitchen stove things broke, and the one person with children in the Page drove over against
That's
it.
right, I did.
So this is, it's not another budget, like you have to snow and.
I mean, and then
It should have been
anticipated,
there.
another fee of transfer. So we cut 40 from this, from the trash. Maybe we add 20 to what we got.
It was waste. You're right, Nathan. Sorry
We
about
haven't
that.
spent, we haven't really, I mean, we're, so, I don't know, what do you think about 80?
Wait. Oh,
I mean,
our
like,
total.
It's our total, yeah, so we cut 40, and if we add 20, then we've got an 80.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. I'd like to make a motion to approve the finance committee budget with an increase of reserve to $8,000. Any discussion?
Explain it a little more, why you want.
So
We cut, go ahead.
in the past, what we've done is any money that we've taken out of other budgets, we have put in ours just as in case as a, hey, we're looking out for you, but we think this is like the right thing. So we'll get the better.
Cover in case it goes bad, you know, like they're.
Yeah, well,
No, so it's there, so we can say, hey, we were wrong.
That's
You
fine.
need it.
Okay.
But-
You had it right, Chris. I mean,
Well, and then they have to come to this committee.
I don't know, if we have any flaws, it's certainly an image.
No, it's all, in the trash, it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
It is, but we rarely dip that much into it, as Gary was
It's
saying.
almost never spent.
And, if we were to be wrong completely on the full 40 approximately, I haven't got the number up here yet, from waste, I believe that we'd be covered by the 20 that we're adding, plus 20 within our 60 that we typically have. And so we would still have 40 to account for other unforeseen things that could come before.
And if it's not spent, what happens to it? Just also the next year.
Yeah, it just lapsed, it closes out, and that's part of the free cash certification, so it's, it all has to be certified by DOR, but yeah, it ends up back into the general fund.
All I'm saying is magic doesn't maintain these fields.
We can use them for porta potties.
All right, so we got a motion, a second, we had discussion, all those in favor of the finance committee budget as amended. Unanimously passes. Medicaid, Medicare,
Make a motion to approve the Medicare FICA budget.
second, any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimously passes. Transfers,
So the Capital Improvements Committee, when they met Thursday night, did endorse the $500,000 as the number they recommend for next year.
I'm surprised because a couple years ago we talked about that number might need to start creeping up.
We're working on it, but I think
We did creep it up, I feel like, for 1 year.
we did. Yeah, we put an extra. We put the $700,000 infusion for the bridge.
Right.
So one thing, just the reason I highlighted this in red is, as you know, part of what's on for tonight is the school stabilization recommended transfer out of school stabilization to offset the budget. If that is approved, and the reason that's sequenced prior to the budget on the draft warrant is if that is approved at the amount or at any amount, the operating budget can be reduced by the same amount because you don't need to raise the same money twice. So that's why I just put this in red. We've never presented it in the budget as a transfer in. I kind of played around with that idea when I was working on the budget back in, December, January. I ended up leaving it out because it's kind of like confusing. But I just wanted to get the point across that, like, if we transfer from school stabilization, every dollar we transfer is a reduction of the bottom line. So
Make a motion to approve the transfers budget.
is there a second? Second. Any discussion?
I just wanted, just for the sake of the minutes, what organization did you say recommended the 500,000?
Capital Improvements Committee.
CIC. Okay.
Yeah.
We can have a separate discussion later on the school stabilization fund.
Yep.
Is that-
Yep.
Okay.
Any other discussion on this? All those in favor? Unanimously passes.
I think there are 2 articles that might still need to be addressed.
I've got a list. There are a couple of articles.
Tonight that I think we were-
Correct. Yep.
The solar field study and the dog license fees.
The solar study, yes. The dog license fees, I hadn't assumed you'd be looking at because it's not got a dollar sign, but the ones I have.
It was just put in our packet, so that's what it was.
Oh, okay. In this packet?
Yeah.
Yeah, page 43.
Oh. Huh.
Just
How'd that get in there? All right.
some guy put it in there.
Some guy. Talk to that guy. So the ones I have, so school stabilization, transfer, the septic loan, the solar feasibility, the reimbursement of prior year expenses. And that's it, other than the ones I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the soldier's sale. Yep, school stabilization, the septic loan, the study of feasibility of solar on town-owned land, and then the reimbursement of prior year expenses, the $342.
So those is not gonna be on.
Not tonight. That's because the select board's going to refine its proposal at its meeting on the 11th. And so,
We also need to vote on a sunset on the water enterprise fund account of 27,000. I don't think there's no sunset on the article request form, and we didn't.
okay.
Yes, we didn't do one on the tree one either.
Well, the tree, maybe you didn't vote it, but he definitely said, like, if we don't do it
Yeah.
soon,
Is that like
it's not worth it.
No,
Like
I'm
that's.
talking about the parks.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that one. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the select board didn't take a position on that yet either. They invited him in to come to the April 11th meeting to better understand that.
Run for Parks Commission.
So should we vote on the sunset on the 27,000 plus for the water enterprise fund account?
I feel like we should probably get some feedback on
But it's gotta be done before Mike retires. So-
Not necessarily, but it's gonna be done in FY '23. I wouldn't have any heartburn about that.
Make a motion to add a sunset clause to the water article that was voted on tonight for the end of fiscal year 23, you said?
Well, I did, but then I
24.
thought, let's go 20.
We can say 20.
The reason is the SRF, because if we
Okay.
do get into that program and there's money left, it would be nice to have the consultants help.
Any discussion?
Good.
All those in favor? Passes.
Make a motion to add an article to the,
Sunset.
or excuse me, make a motion to add a sunset to the Parks and Rec article for tree removal to June 30th, 2023.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anything else?
So then, are we gonna talk about these tonight or is for another night?
I think if you're ready, the four that I mentioned are all ready.
Let's go.
Okay, make a motion to approve school stabilization article.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Yeah.
Good number, 397,000, something like that.
Yeah.
That happens for 3 years.
Yeah, that's right. If you look, this is kind of and this number I've highlighted, the 1.26 is very, very close to what the year-end balance is. It's within $4,000. So basically, this doesn't take into account investment income and all of that, but in round numbers, that number would support the next 3 years, and then it would drop off heavily. The select board did discuss this the other night. Was that last night? Was that last night? They did affirm this number for the proposal. They do expect, starting in FY '24, to start to taper it down more gradually than what you see here. One of the reasons for that is that, as you can see, we're going to pay off a fair amount of retiring debt in FY '24. So the debt service line is going to zero out. So that would be a pretty good time for the taxpayer to start to shift more of the school borrowing onto the tax rate. But the other idea of kind of a relatively short drawdown period is these monies were paid in over these 5 fiscal years from 17 to 21. So the board, both this board and the prior board, had the idea that people who paid into it should really primarily benefit rather than try to spread it out
I
over
remember that was the
15
discussion
years.
here on this board too. that
Yeah.
people paying into
But
it.
it's gonna be a big shock for the taxpayers.
Yes.
Once that money's gone.
Yes, it will.
It will be. You're
I'd
right.
rather see that. I don't think we have the authority to tell the selectmen how to do that.
Most certainly do.
But they are listening.
I would much rather see that taper off over a longer time span. Now, whether you're here or not, I sort of get that if you put the money in, you see the benefit, but there's a lot of reserve funds that have monies, and whether it's here at the school, that's water under the bridge, but it's gonna be between that and the overrides, and like I say, in 3 or 4 years, it's gonna be a shock. I would rather see that taper off a lot longer to diminish the shock and to spread the pain, I guess.
I'm kind of with Chris.
Wait till you see what happens when we can't balance it with free cash. That's really,
So,
it's gonna be a circus. Anyway, we've had a motion, we've had a second, any other discussion?
I kind of support what Chris said. I understand the retiring debt thing, but I also just have a feeling that we should make it something like 200,000 and let it taper off more slowly into.
but we don't have the ability to do that, we can just vote against it. No, so that's what you do, is you let the town know that we have a slight reservation.
Not sure I want to do that.
So can I start with something that
Please
we
do.
talked about a little bit last night, was tapering it, sort of going on a linear curve of diminishing payment. So say this year would be, and we didn't agree on this, because what we had to agree on was this year's. Next year, could be a different select board, you never know. We could all be thinking differently too, but the thought was to stay with the 397 this year, and then have a sort of a linear decline in the amount that's paid each year, so that we lessen the shock at the end period. You know, at the period be the time where we have that money to pay out. You know, that's still a work in progress and is not, you know, we didn't come to any kind of consensus last night, but we talked about ideas of how we would lessen the shock.
Any other discussion on this article? All those in favor of supporting the article? Opposed? Or in favor of opposed?
Next one I've got down is the septic loan. This is, there are 3 years left. There were 2 septic loans. One of them was paid off last year, but there were 2 of them. So that came up last night because we did pay one off.
Okay, that's
There's one more that has 3 years left. Stephanie, I went through the debt tables today. So that's the 10,364. That's shown.
Make a motion to approve the septic loan article.
Is there a second? Any
Jim, that's
discussion?
shown as number 10 on the annual.
Got it. 10,364.
Yep.
So you say Chris second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Chris, why don't you do that?
I'll do that one as cut and paste.
Okay, septic is?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, it doesn't, it's not worth signing it. It's truly one that is on there every year, and it's the same thing, it's something that will, like Angus said, go away in a couple years.
Next one,
Um,
feasibility.
make a motion to approve the solar feasibility article.
Article 16 in the packet.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion?
Well, let me get to page number 842. I mean, I think this is a good idea generally, but the locations that are proposed within this article do not give me much faith. The 1910 building, annex public safety building, is that on the top of it that we're talking about, or behind in that little field that's right next to the bandstand?
No, that would be canopies.
What?
Canopies over the parking lot,
Canopies over the parking lot?
which you're not familiar with.
In the Newbury part, right off of Route 1.
Give me a minute to Google that. Well, the next one's the DPW yard at Pipesdale Hills. So is that a canopy too?
Those would not be canopies.
And then the south field at Dunfield. I don't think that that's a good use of that space at this point in time. So I personally, I'm leaning towards voting against this article.
Any other?
But I'm gonna look up what a solar canopy is to inform, to educate myself, because there's no information about that.
Because it's just a study to look into it, so. You know.
I like the idea, I hate to suggest this.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe that washes out in the studies, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, look at like over by, and it's not town land, but in theory, it's like by the highway, where the exit ramps, like that's where solar power, in theory, it's places like that.
Anybody else have anything? I feel like I let you down when I vote no on these things. I'm gonna vote no anyway. All those in favor? All those opposed?
2 to 3.
3 to 2.
In favor?
3 to, so what do you want to vote in favor or against? Favor.
I'm gonna let you do that one, Walt.
Okay.
You can do that one, and that'll be your
The
narrative.
reimbursement of prior year's expenses, I didn't put any backup into there. Basically, that's two separate expenses by 2 different town committee members, both of which came into the finance department after the July 15th deadline. And by statute, anything that's not either expended or encumbered by July 15th, we cannot pay a prior year bill. So one of these, it was an open space committee and a tree committee member. So it's both were legitimate expenses, just not timely filed. So that's what the $342 is. That is a 4/5 vote.
Really?
So we,
Wow.
oh, wait.
What number? is
At the
that
town
one?
meeting.
Um,
That is, what was it?
Article 27.
27, yep. And all the numbers will change.
Got it.
Make a motion to approve the prior year expense article, or currently article number 27.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
There's really nothing to do, right? When you can't debate, let's just.
Right, it needs to go to one now.
All those in favor? Chris, why don't you take that one?
Okay, and then I hadn't mentioned this, but because it's pretty routine, but the revolving account, you know, if you make a recommendation on that, I don't believe that's when you've taken up. I do intend, I've been working with Stephanie on this, and at the select board's next meeting, we do intend to propose some changes to those numbers. So I don't know if you want to wait on that.
Number
Until
9.
it's finalized.
Yeah, you might wait. Yeah, the summer rec needs to go up and this curbside collection ought to go down. And so we'll have those numbers for the April 11th meeting.
Okay,
Is that the night that these numbers will get finalized?
Yep. Everything's going to be finalized
So
that night.
that's our next meeting, April 11th?
No, that's the select board's meeting. So that's one thing we'll talk about is when to get you guys scheduled for the,
I think we got an email today about potential dates for that, so we all
Yep.
have time to review that, check
Yep.
our schedules.
Good.
So, we need to take the step of appointing someone to.
Before we get to that, can I make one comment about
Yeah,
number 6?
yep.
I would like to request you all respectfully to please get your article narratives written by that date, April 11th. So it could be midnight that day. I want to start working on it that week.
Okay.
And if you can't, for some reason, let me know, and just let me know when you can't get it by, but please try to set a goal for April 11th.
You're looking at me.
I wasn't looking at you.
That's not. I'd like to, we need to make a couple of appointments. We have 2 unfulfilled committee positions, and I'd like to nominate Walt for the Capital Improvements Committee.
Second.
There'll be no discussion. All those in favor?
Wow, that's harsh.
I'd like to appoint Chris to the Investment Policy Committee.
Second.
Well,
Be no discussion. All those in favor?
Vote till we discuss. What is it even about?
You're on it.
Congratulations. Any communications with the committee?
Gonna have to resign already.
We've had that happen this week, but any additional?
I think it was last week.
Was it last week? Any additional communications?
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
I went to the Finance Committee website today just to make sure I understood what time the meeting was, and I did notice that the membership needs to be updated.
Okay.
It shows 2 vacancies and Chuck on the committee, and now there's 1 vacancy and Chuck is not on the committee.
I think I actually emailed our clerk about that weeks ago.
I changed that a week ago. I changed that the day he came in, or the day that,
He emailed.
I'm not a member.
Oh.
Jim's not a member.
Jim's a member.
He's the clerk secretary. I'm a vice chair.
I'm
no just plebeian
member,
member.
but I fixed it.
And then it will say capital improvement representative, investment policy representative.
I'm not a member, so.
Right.
Your vacancy.
Your votes are nullified.
What's the will of the committee?
Make a motion to,
Can I ask a question?
You may.
We're not gonna adjourn yet. What happens about the resignation of Chuck? Do you have to formally inform the selectmen, or how does it?
I don't appoint, I don't accept resignations. The selectmen have been made aware of that, through the town manager.
Do we have any idea what the time frame is on that?
They do their very best to fill the committee, and it's a challenging committee, and they're gonna continue to look for good candidates.
But do they have to put out a notice, is what I'm saying?
I think they have notices for, they have a section.
it probably needs to be updated on the website that the volunteers opportunities part of it where there are open positions. And so there's currently an open position on our committee.
And just a suggestion, when they do it, if somebody does decide they wanna move forward with that, they just do it on another issue like last time. You can't be on any other committee in town if you decide to be on the committee.
That's right. And you can't be on Parks and Rec either, as far as I'm aware. But you can be on the 2 committees that you 2 have been appointed to tonight.
Right,
You are a subcommittee.
I understand that.
Brilliant.
Chris, is your appointment through 2025? I think.
Thought it was 23,
No,
No,
3 years.
3-year appointment.
but it was filling a vacated position, so I think you might wanna check that.
Okay.
I thought it was 2024, quite honestly.
I'm going with the
Joe
23 for
Joe
now.
wasn't on for very long.
23 is a shorter time frame than I can.
I think you just,
Nathan, you're the vice chair.
That's right.
That's what I said, 23 when I,
Okay.
all right, we gotta,
Make a motion to adjourn.
is there a second?
second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you all.
You guys.